Hello, my name is Catherine Foley and I'm going to read from my book Beyond the Breakwater, and today's chapter is 56, Joe Martell. Our house in Waterford City was called Corsica. The three-syllable word appealed to me when I was small. It was a satisfying word to say and I could spell it out easily. I loved the way it sat in cast iron letters on our gate, all definite and distinct. Corsica. It was where our great-grandfather, Captain Joe Martell, had come from. It was like a little wayfarer's arrow in those early days. We were here and Corsica was way over there, an axis on which to mark a trail. Captain Joe Martell ran away to sea when he was 16. That was back in 1873, a year after a full census was conducted in Ajaccio, the capital of Corsica, which at the time was a bustling fishing port on the western coast of the Mediterranean island. For some reason he didn't want to stay, so he escaped to a life at sea. As I got older, my ideas about my ancestor became a little fanciful. I'd wonder if he ran away because he'd fallen in love with a woman who was forbidden to him by his papa. Perhaps his father, Bastien Martell, a stonemason, had threatened to come after him with a gun for thinking of dishonouring his family in such a way, and so he'd left in a hurry. What I do know is that he secured a job as a sailor on board a ship and that he sailed out of Ajaccio, thus becoming a merchant seaman. In time he became a boatswain, which is an officer in charge of the deck crew and the ship's deck equipment. On one of his voyages he met Captain William Ryan from Passage East, and the two became fast friends. They must have been in their 20s when they came to Passage on a holiday, Captain Ryan showing him his home place, where small fishing boats were tied up along the quays in the village, where the houses snuggled in under the cliffs at a narrow stretch in the River Suir before the estuary widens to flow out to open sea. It was here that Joe Martell met Willie's sister, Mary Ryan. We have a photograph of Mary Ryan wearing a long skirt, standing in the road with her hand raised to shield her eyes from the light. She looks cross, flinty even, as if she's calling someone and is waiting impatiently for that person to come to her. This is in contrast to a photograph we have of Joe Martell, who looks dreamy, with a drooping moustache and a slouched, soft cloth cap, very much in keeping with the manner of his countrymen back in his native Corsica. His eyes are deep set under the brim of his cap. Though different, it seems that the two fell in love and were married in 1883 in Crook Church, the grey stone building on the cliff top overlooking the wide expanse of water. They had 4 daughters, RoseAnn, Maggie, Angela and Mary Ellen, who was the youngest. My mother, Ina, who was the daughter of Mary Ellen, could clearly remember Joe Martell, even though she was only a little girl when he died. They used to walk along the Cockle Walk together, chatting away hand in hand. He had black hair, dark brown eyes and sallow skin. When he got older, he used to make model ships, which he moored against detailed miniature piers, all set against the painted background of the river estuary, with detailed scapes of Ballyhack, Arthurstown, Duncannon and Cheat Point. These elaborate seascapes were housed in great display cases made of glass, and he used his Mary's grey hair for the wisps of smoke coming out of the funnel of the ships. "You'll be beautiful like your Aunt Madeline when you grow up," Joe Martell used to tell my mother when she was small, comparing her to one of his sisters. "You'll be a lady and ride a horse," he'd tell her. They used to have great chats, herself and her grandfather. She remembered how he had a funny way of saying certain words, such as mices instead of mice and ices instead of cream cakes. and we know that he was the first seaman to bring a gramophone home to Passage East from one of his voyages. It was many years later that RoseAnn and I decided to travel to Corsica. It was a complicated trip that involved flying to Marseille first, where we felt the lovely heat of the Mediterranean sun on our backs. The next day we caught the ferry and travelled through the summer night towards a distant landmass that loomed ever larger as the dawn came up. To our knowledge, Captain Joe Martell never returned to see his family or the home of his youth again. My sister and I were emotional the day we saw the mountains of Corsica in the distance. He had left all of this behind. As the ferry sailed into the port of Ajaccio, the sun came up and we saw purple and lilac hills wrapped around the ochre and cream-coloured houses of the old port. As the ship glided in, the sun burned away the morning mist, and the great wide expanse of bay with its coral of white cliffs lay before us. The distant hills were still a sleepy lilac colour, but the sea was a turquoise blue, and the houses and hotels of the little town were warm and yellow. RoseAnn and I had lumps in our throats as the boat got closer to the dock. We felt as if we were coming home, and we were determined to find some links with his past. Maybe we'd find a key to his early life and to his family. We wanted to dig up any trace of him to see if there was any record of his life. Our search began as soon as we had docked and checked into our hotel. Without wasting any time, we headed out towards La Chapelle des Grecs and the local cemetery beyond. It was deathly quiet when we got there in the bright mid-morning. No one was about, but we began looking for a Martell plot, wandering through the little narrow lanes that wound themselves between the large tombs and lavish burial chambers. We peered at the family names and at the sad framed photographs of the deceased. Nervously, we squeezed through half-open gates into forgotten, overgrown parts of the cemetery. It was an eerie place in the white sunshine, with the cicadas clacking away. It was still, ancient and deserted. But in the end, le cimetière des sept familles yielded no clues. We felt rejected as we walked back towards the centre of Ajaccio. Over the coming days, we went through the census records at the National Archives, trawling through dusty columns of names, and with our broken French, we asked bemused natives for directions. They looked sceptically at us. Perhaps they wondered why we were not going to the beach or up to trek in the mountains. We visited the Maritime Museum, where one man hunched his shoulders, lifted his eyebrows, and said with a great Gaelic flourish, Il est difficile de trouver comme une aiguille dans une meule de fond. We said, nodding our heads in weariness, just about grasping his meaning, which had to do with our search being difficult, like finding a needle in a haystack. C'est vrai, I responded, giving my few Gaelic words a spin of their own. We left Corsica without unearthing any living link with Joe Martell or his family. And yet, we did feel as if we'd uncovered something. We both realised there was something odd about the place, the sun, the stone, the shade and the locals. In the old part of the town, it struck us both very forcibly that there was something familiar about Corsica. In le vieux port d'Ajaccio, when we walked the narrow streets, we knew what it reminded us of immediately. The smells, the cool evenings, the shade-darkened corners, the sunlit concrete, even the faces of the people seemed to remind us of Passage East, our own childhood holiday idyll. Le vieux port d'Ajaccio was just like our mother's village. It had the same seagoing vibe, the same breezy aspect, the same narrow curved streets with their pockets of coolness and warmth. The yellow stones in the sunshine seemed quite reminiscent of the whitewashed houses in Passage. As we left, we were determined we'd return. It made us smile to think that our great-grandfather, the salty mariner who had run away to sea, had found a home away from home in Waterford. It seemed as if he had fulfilled his childhood dreams of going to sea, and rather than escaping, he had run towards his fate and made his home in Passage East. So that's all for today. Thanks for listening. Talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.